Silent Hill 4 The Room. Hello, little black sheep of the Team Silent family. Personal feelings aside, it's not too far-fetched to say this game is controversial in the Silent Hill fan community. For the most part, it's received pretty well, but the fervor for it is nowhere near the first 3 games. Now, personal feelings inserted, the game definitely has its fans, and by no means would I personally ever describe it as bad, but I would have to say Silent Hill 4 as a game is sort of middling for me. There are elements that I like and some that I really don't, but what I will praise is the music. And thank goodness, because that's why we're here. To explain what about the music works for me, let me highlight one of the major critiques on Silent Hill 4. Some people complain the gameplay of running back and forth between the same areas to an apartment hub is annoying, and while I'm not here to debate that, I am here to say the music goes perfectly hand in hand with it. Before we delve into the depths of Silent Hill 4, I have to clarify that this episode of Game Music Minutia is slightly different than the rest, as Yamaoka doesn't have too much to say about the compositions he made this time around. It's actually quite odd how much of his creative process he revealed when making the score for the first 3 games, only to answer interview questions for Silent Hill 4 with pretty vague answers. While that should be annoying for a series like this that relies on evidence, we've reached my favorite part of the journey, the best part, really, as we can now really theorize and hypothesize what Yamaoka's goals were with the score. So yes, this is my opinion, but it also has a great deal of support. So without further ado, away we go. What if I told you that Silent Hill 4 soundtrack, from the American release to the expanded Japanese version, is the purest form of Yamaoka we've had in the original 4 games? As we talked about before, Silent Hill, Silent Hill 2, and Silent Hill 3's soundtracks are all companion pieces to their narratives and themes, with the connective tissue to make them all feel like part of the same universe. While The Room's OST has similarities to sounds and musical motifs we've heard in the previous 3 entries, there's an element in them that makes them feel completely different than the rest. Let me explain. The most common musical threads we've discussed so far in our Silent Hill retrospective is the use of industrial sounds to evoke emotions, create an audio dictionary for the player, and tie in with specific characters and themes. For example, Silent Hill's score gave us, the player, the audio cues or audio dictionary to know the difference between the real world and the other world. Most of the rock sounds in Silent Hill 2 were a nod to James's deep-seated anger and resentment, and Silent Hill 3's catchy beats were a nod to Heather's modern sensibilities clashing with the old world. Everything lended to a theme or a character's overall personality. However, while Silent Hill 4's music is largely a study of Henry Townsend's mental state, it also steps into 2 personal realms: Yamaoka's mindset as a composer and our personal experience playing the game. To put it simply, the music is about you, me, and Yamaoka. When comparing the songs on the OST to one another, they all sound very different, as if composed by more than one person. They span different genres and music choices, from complete melodies to pure rock vocal tracks to more raw riffing. Let's compare a couple songs to drive this point home. Starting with The Last Mariachi, if you only heard this song from the game, you would likely believe the rest of the OST would feature more of an experimental composition from Yamaoka, with its offbeat industrial sounds mixed with an out-of-tune rambling guitar. Now let's look at Fever Chill, which is the antithesis of The Last Mariachi. It has several defined beats that layer on top of one another to make a complex but easy to listen to track. Like I said, sounds like more than one person made the soundtrack, right? Well, since we know that isn't the case and Yamaoka was behind them all, what does that mean? There are 2 things happening here. Yamaoka is letting us step into his creative process, and we're audibly experiencing the intimate and confusing story that runs through Silent Hill 4. Let's discuss these separately and then pull them together. As any artist will admit, creating can be an intimidating, restless, and frustrating experience at times. For Yamaoka, this is his 4th soundtrack he's had to make in the Silent Hill franchise, which is inarguably a difficult task. Not to mention, much of the success of the previous entries came down to the score, which likely added a great deal of pressure on Yamaoka's shoulders. In most interviews you see from him during the initial release of this game, his comments largely revolve around his understanding that the fans were extremely anxious and anticipating more greatness than they've ever had from a Silent Hill game. So yeah, weight of the world, I'd say. With that in mind, it's interesting to listen to Yamaoka's score here. The stark differences in genre start to feel more purposeful than experimental, as if the composer is trying to make the listener realize the twists and turns they had to experience to create the entire score. In turn, songs like the previously mentioned The Last Mariachi or the Suicidal Clock Chime, for example, are fantastic musical representations of Yamaoka's rambling mind, searching for another track to make, manifested in the music by rambling and out-of-tempo structures. Then, we have the clear-minded and laser-focused part of Yamaoka's creative process in tracks like Fever Chill, or my personal favorite, Wounded War Song, as their steady and unrelenting beats reflect a composer who knows exactly what kind of emotion he wants to convey. As I said before, this is all taken a step farther. Where do we, the player, fit into this? As we talked about with the previous games, the music we hear is to guide us through the narrative themes, character beats, and gameplay mechanics, but in Silent Hill 4, it's actually all about us as active participants in the game. The story of Silent Hill 4 follows Henry as he unravels the mysteries behind a murder spree plaguing his town and apartment building, both of which are not entirely part of Silent Hill. As Henry is trapped in his apartment with only a questionable hole in his bathroom wall to travel through, the entire experience is one of claustrophobia, isolation, and delving into the unknown. While previous games had similar concepts, they were always happening solely to the characters we controlled. And while Henry is our lead and lends into Silent Hill 4, Team Silent made an interesting choice to make all apartment gameplay in the first-person perspective. With this interesting choice, we are now experiencing part of the story on a more personal level. We don't see Henry anymore, and in turn, we're essentially the ones trapped in the room. We see the world through his eyes, and in turn, through our eyes. Much like Harry and James before him too, Henry is also rather generic and non-assuming. But this time around, he's more of an avatar for us, the player, to step into. Unlike James and Harry, the score isn't about him, it's about us as we navigate that story. Combine these gameplay choices with Yamaoka's score and we have an experience unlike any other in the Silent Hill series. The tracks that represented Yamaoka's rambling thoughts and creative struggle are now felt on a deeper level by us, the player, because we're just as confused as Henry is. Why are we trapped in this room? How do we get out? The more questions we ask, the more confusing it all gets, and the music perfectly matches that. On the flip side, when we see Henry in third-person mode after he travels through this creepy bathroom warp hole, we start to feel a little bit more clear-minded and focused on a task. We're out of the room, we're searching for clues, and we feel that we can probably solve this mystery. Again, accented by tracks that are more steady beats with clear melodies. Combining all of this, we're no longer just spectators of characters dealing with Silent Hill, we are emotionally involved and connected to what's happening, achieved by Team Silent's subtle but wonderful choices for first person, and Yamaoka's lack of rules in his score. We are finally, truly experiencing Silent Hill, and hey, as scary as it probably was for Yamaoka and the team to make a game that would fulfill every fan's expectations, I would argue on an intellectual and emotional level, they did. You just might not have known it. Yeah, I gotta say, that was a whirlwind. I honestly have been sitting on that idea for months, and a lot like Yamaoka, I went through valleys trying to explain what I was thinking. Hopefully it came out coherent enough, but as always, feel free to reach out in the comments so we can discuss this all further. As I said last video, I'm so thankful to be back making more content, and surprise, we've surpassed 500 subscribers! Thank you all for that, it really does mean a lot to me. If you could continue getting the word out by liking, sharing, and subscribing, it only helps. Perhaps next episode we'll delve more into Silent Hill 4 or jump back into an older title, or maybe a brand new game altogether. For now though, thanks again and we'll talk very, very soon.